Hi, thanks for joining me. Okay, so my name is Selena, and I'm here today with one of our veteran carriers on the Relay Network, Jessica.
Hi.
And I am also here with our senior support staff, Josh.
Howdy.
Okay, so we're going to go through some questions on how to handle some typical trucking issues while on the relay run. So, Jessica, we'll start with you. What do you do if you need to add a stop on a run that a driver has already accepted?
Great question, Selena. So what I usually do is I want to call the driver just to make sure that he's available, especially if the run is going to start earlier than we had anticipated, or it's going to go a little bit later than we had estimated the time frame. Once I get confirmation from the driver that he's available to do the change, then I usually update the relay on the app. And then depending on, what change it does, then I'll also update the rate.
Great answer. I think definitely communication is the key. So what do you have to say, Josh?
Thanks, Selena. So I think Jessica pretty much nailed it. It's first thing you want to do is just check to see if the driver is even available. And if they are, you can update the addresses into the Relay app. And then depending on how long it's going to be going over, you're going to want to also update the rate so the driver gets paid for their time as well.
Thank you, Josh. Now, the next question, what happens if my run goes over or the driver finishes early? Josh?
Thanks, Selena. So on the Relay Network, there's two types of jobs. There's hourly jobs and there's flat rate jobs. So if your job is paying hourly, if the driver finishes early, it'll just be computed based on the amount of hours. So if they finish an hour early, you'll get charged an hour less. And if they go an hour over, you'll be charged an hour more. For flat rate jobs, essentially, if the driver completes it early, they're going to get that flat rate of what you set it at. If the run goes over on a flat rate job, you just want to make sure you're up to tune on what the current relay detention policy is, and you can always get that by calling the support line and asking what that is.
Thank you, Josh. What do you have to say, Jessica?
So basically the same what Josh just said. I guess the only thing I would add is, as a carrier, one of the things that has been very successful for me is communicating with the drivers. So for example, if they're being detained, I try to get as much information as possible, and I call, either the shipper or the receiver and try to find out, or try to kind of rush the process a little bit for them to make sure that we stay within, a reasonable amount of time. So I communicate with them and then try to get them unloaded or loaded depending on if it's the shipper or the receiver that they're being held up at.
Thank you. That was a great answer from both of you. This brings me to my third question. What happens if the carrier's equipment does not pass the pre-trip inspection and is deemed either unsafe or too dirty to drive? Jessica?
So for me, this is a big one. As a carrier, what I do is I always make sure to check the equipment prior to the relay. So I make sure that all the paperwork is in there that needs to be in there. And then I make sure that, if there's trash in there, that trash is picked up, and that we're doing the pre-trip inspections accordingly. Make sure that, where the key's going to be located. So I generally do that prior to my runs. If for some reason I cannot get to the truck because it's, in a different location than I am, then usually I ask the drivers to check it. If they report any issues, then usually I handle those immediately after their return.
Thank you, Jessica. That's a great answer. Josh, what do you have to say?
Thanks, Selena. So we would just always recommend to carriers that they try to keep their equipment top notch when they're using relay drivers, because relay drivers are top-notch drivers themselves. So if you know that you're going to have a truck that's down or whatnot, or it might have an issue, it doesn't hurt to communicate that with the driver as well, so the driver's aware of it. And if you do have other trucks available, you can always assign those as well. But it just goes down to, you get what you put in. And if your equipment's good and it's safe and it's clean, drivers are going to want to work for you, and they're going to tell other drivers that they see, that this carrier, they got really good equipment, they got really nice trucks. So that's why we always stress the importance of equipment that's A, safe, and B, clean.
Thank you for that, Josh. I did want to add, definitely keeping an open line of communication, of course, is the key to a lot of these. Obviously, if the equipment is deemed, where it's completely unsafe, where they're not able to drive it, there is a possibility that the relay can be canceled. So we definitely want to keep an open line of communication. The possibility of giving another truck, issuing another truck during the run. Now, this brings me to my next question. What happens if a driver cancels a run? Jessica?
Basically, it just depends how far in advance a driver cancels a run. If it's a couple of days in advance, it's no big deal, because usually it goes back into the relay network and then we can get it covered. But if it's like the night before for the next morning, that's a real deal breaker for me as a carrier, because I don't have sufficient time to get another driver in that run. So it's really important that, for us as a carrier, that the drivers are really ensuring that they can do the load prior to accepting it. If they have any questions on the run, if they have, feel free to call us. I love to hear from the drivers as far as like, hey, what are the details of this load? Where is it going? How long can I expect to be out? How is your equipment? That's awesome. I'd rather go through the details to make sure that the run does not get canceled last minute.
Awesome answer. Thanks so much, Jessica. What do you have to say, Josh? Anything to add?
Yeah, thanks, Selena. So Jessica already kind of touched on it with the severity of the cancellations. When drivers are brought on to the relay network, they know that, if you cancel a couple days out, it's not great, but it doesn't severely affect your account or the carrier. However, if you cancel last minute or the night before, like Jessica mentioned, at that point, a disciplinary action is taken on the driver, and they can't see any runs for a specified amount of time. So the last minute cancellations are a rarity. They do very rarely happen. And in the case that they do happen, the drivers are trained to supply a reason for that, and a disciplinary action will end up happening. And, sometimes it happens where, a family issue will come up the morning of or the night before, and you really can't avoid those. But in situations like that, the relay driver will reach out to either support or the carrier, communicate that with them, and let them know what's going on.
Thanks, Josh. That was a great answer. So this brings me to my next question. What if a carrier needs to cancel a run? Jessica?
That's a good one, because from time to time that does happen. So the way that I handle these, I do a few things. So one, I definitely try to make sure that my runs with relay drivers are not canceled. Meaning if I have, let's say, my company drivers, and then I'll move things around. So if a company driver is available, but I had a relay driver already and their load got canceled, I try to shift that load to them, because I've already made a commitment to the relay driver. But if I do a couple things. One, I communicate with that driver immediately once I know that there could be an issue. And then I also offer a replacement load, especially if I can find something that is going to meet the parameters. But I let them know. So I'll say things like, hey, you know what, your load was canceled. I can put you on a different load. It might start a little bit earlier, or it might start a little bit later. And then I give them the details to make sure that that'll still work with them. And then I'll let them decide if that's something that they're interested in doing.
Thank you, Jessica. That is a great answer. Now, what do you have to add, Josh?
Thanks, Selena. So Jessica pretty much hit the nail on the head with the communicating with the driver whenever an issue is like that is going to arise. And if it does come to it and you have to cancel the run as a carrier, we would recommend doing it as soon as you know. So you don't wait until the next morning of and the driver shows up and then you notify them that the run was canceled the night before. If you have to cancel a run the night before, there's no charge to that. That's totally fine. There's no charge. However, if a driver shows up to your yard, or they're at least on their way to the job and then the job cancels, there is a cancellation fee that goes along with that. So that's why we just always recommend to carriers, if you know a job's going to cancel, just mark it as canceled in the Relay app as soon as you can, so the driver can either go find new work, or they at least are aware that they don't have to get up early the next morning to go to that job. And Jessica also kind of touched on it, worth having that replacement load if the original job does cancel with the driver. If you end up going that route, you just want to make sure that you update that driver's Relay order with the correct start times and addresses and everything like that.
Yeah, definitely. Jessica, you wanted to add something?
So, Josh, you said, let the driver know, or, if it's late at night. Just also remember that as a carrier, right, you don't want to become the carrier that's always canceling loads, because that could potentially affect the drivers accepting your runs in the future. So just how we have the ability to rate the drivers and their, timeliness, if we are not careful with this, then, we can also get a bad rating. So I'm always mindful and try to make sure that those runs are not canceled.
I wanted to thank Jessica and Josh for joining me in how to handle typical trucking issues while on a relay run. Thank you.